and the waters that surround us, and pay my respect to elders past and present.
We thank you, Lord, for our being called by your fellow citizens this office of honour and trust. Give us grace, diligently and honourably, free from private interest or prejudice, to discharge the duties entrusted to us to the common good and in your sight, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Please have a seat. We have no apologies this evening. Are there any declarations of interest? We have the minutes of the previous meeting there. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Miles. Question, Councillor Sanderson.
Mr Mayor, I have one correction at item 1.2 by email after the draft minutes were put out. I suggest that the second paragraph there be inserted, that this first paragraph has remained rather than been replaced.
I see.
And the two are inconsistent, so I think the first paragraph should be deleted.
Right, thank you. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Sure.
So it's just an error in the...
Yeah, just take the first paragraph. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
I won't ask to follow up on that tonight, but I presume it will eventually come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
Any further questions or clarifications related to the minutes? Councillor Williams.
I appreciate the answer to question 13.3 in the minutes. But I think the outcome is counterproductive to what was originally, as I understood, agreed. We've now got 2 shrubs rather than trees. The whole objective was to replace the unsuitable tree with 2 suitable trees, but now we've got 4 metres, which is basically a shrub. So it'll add very little to the streetscape. Just an observation.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, clarifications? Councillor Sanderson.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I have one relating to the question without notes at item 13.7 regarding Prince Edward Street.
Yes.
The answer that was given in the minutes is this question had been answered under a separate memo to all councillors. I don't really think that's appropriate. My view would be that one of the functions of questions without notice is to inform the community about council activities. So I think the content of the memo should have gone to the community.
We'll include it. We'll include it in the minutes. Good. If you're happy, it's easy.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Well, carrying on from there, I mean, the memo itself didn't answer the questions in full in any case. One of the points to make is that the Council Resolution of 14 of May was to consult with residents about the proposed partial road closure of Prince Edward Street, following consultation and design, and report back to Council in July. In late August, apart from inquiries from individuals who've made of council officers and councillors, all that residents know of as Council's Resolution of May and traffic counts have taken place in recent times. I think we really need to inform the community better about our activities. As to the memo to councils, which I believe should be on the public record, it does not address my question as to an update of the schedule envisaged for completion dates and design and installation. Memo also advises that a traffic engineer has been engaged to assist with the design. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I'm an engineer with considerable experience in control systems. Traffic control is a control system and will often not be worth over-analysing. I don't really believe the problem with Prince Edward Street was one that required a great deal of analysis. I think what we're talking about is a couple of no entry signs. I'll not further analyse the problems here, but I think we'll probably learn more from consultation with the community than we will with consultation with a traffic engineer. In summary, my concerns about this are that we appear to have spent more time and funds on a simple project than was ever envisaged. Residents do not know what's going on, and we have no schedule to to rectify any issue about to rectify an issue that's been apparent for many years.
Thank you, councillor. So we have a few things we need to follow up as a result of your comments there. Could you mind passing your notes up the cups at the end of the meeting, and we'll take them on board as well. Thank you for raising that. Any further, Councillor Miles?
Business without notice, just noting point 3, that letter has been sent. I just want to thank the General Manager for preparing and sending that letter.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. So we've got a mover and a seconder. All in favour?
Aye.
That's passed. Thank you. Next item is 3.1, recognising Hunters Hill Day. Councillor Williams.
Move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Moved, Councillor Williams. Seconded, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hunters Hill has a long and proud history, over 150 odd years of existence. It also has a lot of pride and shares a lot of common values which are important to the Hunters Hill community. What's proposed here is for us to recognise that 31st of July is an important event or date in modern or contemporary Hunters Hill, and to acknowledge that as a day for community engagement, celebration, at whatever level the community wishes to do. We just had a very excellent event, which was rather spontaneous in terms of very little advertisement, very little involvement of council, but we had over 100 odd people at the Hunters Hill Club a couple of weeks ago on the 31st of July, which was a wonderful event. It just everybody was relaxed, everybody was there for a common purpose of celebrating the good values and good issues associated with being a Hunters Hillian, and many people stayed for dinner as well. So I think it's important that we recognise that, and people may wish to celebrate the day just with a simple family dinner or a barbecue or whatever takes the fancy of people in Hunters Hill. But it is important that we rally around our important events and that we celebrate what we think are important. The difference in the motion this evening to what was proposed to be put last meeting is that I've included community consultation, which I think is important. Council acknowledging Hunters Hill Day doesn't make a proclamation or set it in stone, but I think it does have value in engaging with the community and finding out whether that view is supported by the majority of Hunters Hill people. And the other parts of the motion are just procedural in terms of how that process should take place. So, Mr. Mayor, I put that motion to Council for consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Would anybody like to speak against the motion?
Yes.
Councillor Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's been a little over a year since the forced merger policy was abandoned by the state government, and I wasn't in attendance at the event the other week. I think it's really time for us to move on from this. We also have to remember that there were 41% of Hunters Hill actually did not support Hunters Hill remaining independent. Now, I would like Hunters Hill to remain independent, and I support an independent Hunters Hill Council, but we need to if we're going to declare Hunters Hill Day, it needs to be inclusive of everybody, including the 41% that didn't support it. And I don't know why they didn't support it. Maybe they economic reasons or footpath couldn't get fixed. Whatever it is, not everybody supported us. So I think it's more important that we try and engage with the community and try and engage with the 41% that didn't support us being independent. Because if we want to save Hunters Hill, we need to fix Hunters Hill, not have a party. I would like to propose that if we're going to call something Hunters Hill Day, that it should be for all the residents. And I would like to see it as a day where councillors spend the day together in the community, meeting with residents and finding out what their concerns are and trying to understand why it is that 41% didn't actually believe we should exist. So perhaps we could have morning tea at Henley Bowling Club and go to Gladesville Shopping Village, talk with residents, sausage sizzle at Baronia Park, afternoon tea at Woolwich. We can stop at places along the way, but the important thing is that we get out to the community. Hunters Hill Day is about us being with the community, not just dancing on the grave of an abandoned state government policy. So I would like to propose that as an amendment, that Hunters Hill Day become a community day and not a celebration of failed policy.
Councillor Collins. So are you foreshadowing an amendment, or are you
No, that's
proposing
the
an amendment
I'm
now?
proposing an amendment now.
Have a seconder for the amendment?
Could we just get the wording, so the wording would be that it's opened up to...
So it's a Hunters Hill Day is a community day where all councillors spend the day together at various places, all the corners of the community, and spend it with residents, engaging, rather than...
I'll second that.
And we would do that on the 31st of July?
I would have thought if we made it, say, the last Saturday of July, so that, it's a Saturday so people can attend. Because not everyone can attend these, nightly precinct meetings. This is a good day for, people to bring their family down, kids, whatever it is, and engage with councillors. Because, there's a lot of people that feel as though they don't get heard. We are very good at listening to the silent majority of the louder members of this community, but there are a lot of people that don't necessarily speak up, and I think Hunters Hill Day should be about engaging with them.
Could I just ask a couple of questions just for clarification,
Yeah.
no other reason? So the day of Hunters Hill Day would be the 31st of July, but we would celebrate on the last Saturday in July. Is that...
No, it could just be the last Saturday of July.
Right, so not necessarily that date.
No, not the... Well, it's tied into that, the last Saturday of July.
Sorry?
The next Sunday is Mukabula.
Yes, the following week's Mukabula.
Of
All
July.
First Sunday,
Oh,
first Sunday in August is always Mukabula.
So maybe the first Saturday of July.
Okay, thank you.
Hunters Hill month.
Hunters Hill month, that's a good idea. I like that idea. Okay, so would anybody like to speak against that,
The proposed amendment.
the proposed amendment?
Yes, I'll speak against it. And I think we need to just put some clarity around what I understand Hunters Hill Day to mean. The date of July 31, to me, is the most recent date in our history of where we have fought for democracy and independence and the things we love about Hunters Hill. So that's why I think July 31 has been chosen. That's the date that is the most recent in our history. But to me, I don't see Hunters Hill Day about celebrating our independence and fight against amalgamation as such. I see it as celebrating all of those issues that we have fought for on behalf of our community and have made our community great. And that includes things like the fight for Kelly's Bush and the fight for Clark's Point. And even Nelson Parade is one of those issues that may go down in history as one of those events that that it is a strong community event. And there are a myriad of other battles that our community has taken on to ensure that our residents have the best possible living and working environment. So that's what I see Hunters Hill Day as about, not just that one event, but as all of those other things. And I don't, like Councillor Williams, I don't see it as an official program of events. I see it as we recognise the day and we invite our community to spend the day reflecting on what makes us great. And we encourage our residents to go down and have a walk through Kelly's Bush, or we encourage people to picnic at Clark's Point, and use our parks and waterways and all those things that have been preserved because of the very, very strong community that we have here in Hunters Hill. That's what I see Hunters Hill Day about. I don't see it, and I in fact don't accept it as being an Independence Day as such. I see it as being an identity day. And that's what that's why I will be supporting the motion, and I'm absolutely sure that that's what Councillor Williams intends the motion to be about.
Thank you, Councillor. Somebody would like to speak for the motion?
For the amendment.
For the amendment, excuse me.
Yeah, sure. I think that we're all pretty much pointed in the same direction here. I actually quite like the idea of having a precinct roadshow, or the councillors all getting out there and showing, getting out there and talking to residents for the day. And if that is, morning tea at Henley Community Centre, and then, a precinct meeting in Gladesville, perhaps going down to Clark's Point or Woolwich, and then going up and having a sausage sizzle, up at Barony Park, so be it. I think that would be quite a good way to spend Hunters Hill Day. Again, I accept Councillor McLaughlin's point that this is the opportunity probably to celebrate a number of things, and I can't really think of a better way to spend that day than to get out there and talk to the community. We're going to engage in a precinct roadshow, and I think that that's something that we could probably investigate at least doing on this Hunters Hill Day, because I think really it's about us engaging with the community and celebrating all those things that Councillor McLaughlin mentioned and that are in the report. No, it's not a single issue day. It's going to be a day for talking about Kelly's Bush and Clark's Point and a whole range of things, all the things that we identify and that Council has identified in things like a CSP are special about Hunters Hill. So I accept that the motion sort of says they celebrate the day and it might be a dinner at night, but I think it would actually be a more appropriate celebration of Hunters Hill Day or Hunters Hill to get out there in the community and do something a bit more active as a council, rather than just having a tea and Becky's night at Hunters Hill Club once a year. I think that we could actually make it a more participant friendly environment, because I think that inevitably if we do make a tea and Becky's at the Hunters Hill Club, it will fade away after a couple of years. And equally, if you do make it a single issue event, that it will progressively get less and less patronised as the year goes on, as years go on. So I kind of like the idea that Councillor Collins has raised, that we get out there in the community and do a bit of spruiking and a lot of listening.
Thank you, Councillor. Who would like to speak against the amendment?
I'd like to ask a question.
Question, Councillor Crassell.
Can I just clarify, because I'm getting a little confused about the precinct roadshow, which I thought was something we had already established as an introduction to ongoing precinct meetings. Is that no longer the case?
No, I think that is the case.
Okay.
Can I just check? I think Councillor Collins is suggesting we use that sort of an idea for the day, do some other things in the community, have some barbecues, get out into the community, see the people on the day as a way to mark the day. And I think Councillor Miles is saying that would be a better way, in support of Councillor Collins. That would be some other things we could do on the day to make the day special.
Another question, if I may.
Yes.
I'm just reading here, because thank you for explaining it in so much detail, because that's not how I read it. But Councillor Williams agreed with you, so that's the intention, obviously. But I'm just wondering around the whole celebration. Are we talking about, because I actually really like this idea, and that's why I'm asking the question before we decide on this motion. I really like the idea of showcasing Hunters Hill. So if it's a Hunters Hill Showcase Day, all the reasons why everyone loves Hunters Hill and you know, I love the idea, like a Kelly's Bush Barbie and a Clark's Point walk and a Baronia Park rugby match and a whatever, something different going on all over the whole suburb on that day. I love it.
So do you have a
But-
question, Councillor?
well, so my
Do you have a
question is-
question, Councillor
because
Cresswell?
if I'm agreeing to this, I just don't understand. Is there some other celebration happening here, or are you just talking about it being exactly what Councillor Collins is suggesting anyway?
Well, just a moment. Who's your question to?
Oh, Councillor Williams, through you, Mr. Mayor. What is your intention that
well,
the
just-
celebration be shaped as?
Mr Mayor, in answer to Councillor Cresswell's question,
Councillor Williams. Yes.
I think Councillor McLaughlin summed it up very well, and as my intent of what I said at the start, it's about shared values. It's about the community coming together in whatever form it wishes to. I don't think council needs to prescribe that, but we need to provide a focal point for the community to initiate that. So, as I said, it can be a family dinner, it can be a barbecue, it can be the community spontaneously all getting together as they did at the Hunters Hill Club. It's not about tea and biggies and scones and things. I think the council needs to do its precinct committees to delve into the issues that concern the community. This is a celebration. This is, as Councillor McLaughlin said, Hunters Hill is defined by a series of battles. The 31st of July was just the recent one. That's our contemporary point in the sand. It's not celebrating anything political. It's about what are our shared values? How do we come together as a community? And I think you were right in your analysis, Mr Mayor, when it was first put up a couple of meetings ago. It's not for council to prescribe this day, it's for the community to embrace it and get engaged. And it's never intended to be a single issue of celebration. It's about who we are, what we share is common, and we do it in the way that we think best. And all council is doing is identifying a day where it's encouraging the community to do that.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Cresswell?
Yes, thank you.
Right. Do you need any further clarification from Councillor Collins?
No, thank you.
Okay. Does anybody want to speak against the amendment? Councillor Williams.
Just a point of clarification, Mr Mayor. In all the statistics I've seen in relation to this matter over the many years, if you want to focus in on the recent merger issue, which is not what this motion is about, 49% is wrong.
It's 41. And it's right here if you
Or
want.
41, it's still wrong. It's always been identified as being 20%. And in any democracy, you will get a divergence of viewpoint. It's a healthy democracy when you have divergence of viewpoint. But my understanding is that there was a vast majority of residents that wish to retain our identity and our individual council with all the important things that go along with that. So I don't accept that reference to 49%. I think
41%.
41%. It's not correct.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Would anybody like to speak for the amendment? Councillor Collins, would you write a reply?
I might just table this submission
Yes.
from
What is
council.
the document?
It's the Fit for the Future submission, where the May 2015, the Micromix Consulting telephone polling. Do you want to pass it around? Yeah. So it is 41%. So, yeah, look, you're suggesting that it's not a single issue, so why does it have to be the 31st of July? I think that's a great idea, what you're suggesting, showcase Hunters Hill. We could have a game on, we could have all sorts of things going on. If we do it 31st of July every year, it becomes a single issue thing. I think we should be celebrating Hunters Hill. And yeah, there have been a lot of battles, and that's one of them. But it's not the only one. We need to widen it. And so I'm suggesting that we make it a Saturday or something of the sort, so that people can actually, certain people can attend that can't make the precinct meetings. And, if we are proclaiming Hunters Hill Day, if we are reserving this day as Hunters Hill Day, we need to be clear about what it is. We can't just say, proclaim it on the 31st of July and make of it what you will. We need to decide what it is. And I think it should be a particular day in the month rather than a specific day, and it should be a showcase of Hunters Hill rather than just a party to celebrate the forced mergers being abandoned.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any clarifications needed at this point?
I just need the amendment read out again.
Certainly, we'll do that. General Manager?
I believe it is Hunters Hill Day become a community day where all councillors spend a day with the community, the day being in July each year.
All right, is that clear?
Can we make it specific so that if it's better the first Saturday of July?
It's up to you.
Yep, first Saturday
First
of July.
Saturday of July?
Yep. Just gives it a bit of space from Muckawalla.
Second, are okay with that? First Saturday of July? I'll put the amendment. Those in favour? Against? That's lost. Thank you. If I might say so, I think there's some good suggestions in what Councillor Collins was suggesting, and maybe there are things we could think about for the future as well. So I go back to the original motion. We've got a mover and a second to the original motion. Councillor Williams?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I agree. Councillor Collins' suggestion in terms of how the day might be celebrated, fine. But let's not prescribe it. We're going out to community consultation. I'm sure we'll get a lot of feedback from the community. They will help us mould what the final decision of council will be. So I'm encouraged that it has the potential to go to the community for consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Against? Who would like to speak against? If you've got a question or you would like to speak against? Councillor Crassoy.
Or not so much speak against it, but I hate to say it, sorry, suggest a couple of amendments. One is, because I do agree with Councillor Collins, I think the 31st of July has potential to become a festering wound, and I don't think that we should choose it to be that date. And on point 2, so I think, a date to be decided could be what you write in point 1. And perhaps put a few options in the community consultation and get people's opinions. Maybe it could be the day that Hunters Hill was formed as a municipality, which is in January, it's hot and everyone's on holidays. But, maybe there are other dates, also not quite so close to Muckawalla. So one amendment would be to just put date to be advised or to be decided. I think 31st of July is dangerous and divisive. The second amendment was that in the community consultation, just to cover off all bases, can we please put also in council newsletters and on social media, we need extensive community consultation. Things get lost just in the press, it just doesn't. And then actually in point 3, because that talks to the 31st of July as well, that the notice explains the intention behind the celebratory day, which is to celebrate our shared values, local identity and independence.
Thank you, Councillor Crassoy.
So are they actually being moved as
So
amendments?
you're moving that as an amendment. So it relates to the date to be decided, the way of consultation with newsletters, social media. Is that correct?
To be expanded.
To be expanded.
To be more comprehensive.
And the other one is to explain the intention behind the day.
Yeah. As opposed to the significance of the 31st of July, which to me picks a wound.
All right.
Second.
Second, Councillor Collins. Councillor Crasso, would you like to speak further on that?
No, I think I said it all.
Would anybody like to speak against that amendment? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Having lived in Hunters Hill for about 65 years, the most recent amalgamation issue is about one of 4 that I can remember. There are probably more. there are also a lot of other significant issues. Kelly's Bush, Hunters Hill Trust, many of the things that this council has done. It's just that the 31st of July is the most significant and probably the hardest fought. I think it's a very significant date, and I think that is the date that we definitely have to celebrate. As far as the inclusivity is concerned, I believe we can include people in a date on the 31st. There's no reason for it to be any other date. There's no other date that sticks out. It's also a date when we've got to remember that this community fought very hard in that last amalgamation battle. And there was a harder battle than probably all the other battles that preceded, but there have been a series of battles. I think it's important that we celebrate that date. I can't think of any other significant date that we could celebrate. It's not intended to open any wounds. We intend to include everyone that was involved. I'm very encouraged. In the short time that I've been on council, the number of people I've spoken to who have come to me and have said, oh, well, I was pro-amalgamation. I am no longer. They've changed their mind. So that's part of the work of this council. And I think we can carry that on. We should be carrying on that work every day of the week. I think the road shows going around the various precincts are going to be a very important part of that. I think we can have one day when it is celebrated, and I think making it the 31st of July is good because it'll rotate around different days of the week. It gives us different opportunities to have different sorts of functions. I think the one we had on the night at the Hunters Hill Club was absolutely appropriate. I'm sure the next time around it'll be something quite different because it'll be a different day of the week, even if it's another weekday. It's something for this community to take on and to mould. It will belong to them. All we're doing is making the decision to nominate this day and give it a name. That's as far as it goes. It's up to this community how they celebrate it. I see absolutely no reason to amend the motion of Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Would anybody like to speak for the amendment? Councillor Collins.
Look, I'd just briefly like to say that I think it's a good amendment. I think there are councillors here that are very clear that it is meant to be 31st of July, which indicates that whilst you might suggest it's celebrating a lot of things, I think it's pretty clear what you actually want here. It is divisive. Let's just make it a community day and not, as Councillor Crasso points out, not trying to open up old wounds. Let's just make it about Hunters Hill residents, not about swapping war stories about amalgamation. So,
Thank you, Councillor Collins. I'd like to speak against the amendment. For the amendment? Any clarifications we need to make?
Just to Councillor Crasso, the openness of
Sorry, Councillor Miles.
The openness of the point one means that if the community did want the 31st of July to be the date, that they could choose that, surely.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's up to the community what day they want.
All right. So I'll just ask General Manager to do his best to clarify what the amendment is, and then we'll go to vote.
Right, well, the notice made, or the amendment would now read that Council, on a date to be determined each year, adopt a Hunters Hill Day following a 28-day community consultation, that the community be asked by way of notification to the local press, newsletter and social media of Council's intent to recognise a day for the community to celebrate its local identity and shared values. We leave out the word independence. I think that's what you're saying. 3, that... No, that's in?
Yep.
Right, okay, good. And 3, the notification explains the significance of the day and invites the community to make submissions.
the intention behind the day.
Intention behind the day. Yeah, okay. And 4 is as printed.
Okay. Is that clear to everybody? I'll put the amendment.
I'd like a right of reply, if I may.
You can, please.
I just think from the small conversation around the table this evening, it's clear that the 31st of July has the potential to be a divisive day. I love everything about the motion. During the amalgamation fight, when I wasn't under the tree of knowledge, I was just cheering you all on from home. But during that time, I would say to Phil Jenkins, can we talk about some of your knowledge around the history of Hunters Hill, some of your talks on the verandas in Hunters Hill, some of your walks, some of your jacaranda knowledge. This is what we need to be sharing with the community now so that they understand why we're fighting so hard. And battles are awful and they're important and significant, especially winning them is significant. It was hard fought and won well. But even in the worst of battles, people want to move on and celebrate the reason you fought it. We fought it because this is a beautiful suburb with stunning heritage and a wonderful community. And I really think that a day that celebrates Hunters Hill and everything it's for and every battle it's fought to retain that is very important. I fear that the 31st of July undermines the intention behind doing that. And that's why I really hope everyone can consider the idea of a different day for such an important occasion. Yeah, even if it's not a date, if it's, as Councillor Collins says, like Mookaboola is always the first Sunday in August every year, and it has been for a very long time. The Food and Wine Festival is always the first Sunday in May, and it has been for a very long time. The Street Feast is becoming known as the third Saturday in November. It has been for a few years. So having a day, it doesn't necessarily diminish it by not giving it an actual date. And in fact, I think it gives people something to look forward to.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll put the amendment, excuse me. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against? That's lost. So we go back to the original motion. Do we need further discussion on the original motion? Are there any amendments to the original motion?
I'd like to just propose a couple of amendments that came out of the previous amendment.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin.
And just to reiterate that the reason July 31 is looking decisive is because we're raising it as a very decisive. It is the most recent date in our history, and that's, to me, that's why it's been chosen. But I would like to take up Councillor Crasoy's point in point 2 about just extending the consultation to the council website and the newsletters, and as we would do with any other consultation. And I think the most recent celebration we had for our identity and independence was actually advertised in all of those forums as well, so it makes sense that we would just include those. So I'm not sure if you're happy to accept
I'm
that.
happy to accept that.
Thank
I
you.
think we may have just missed the newsletter, but I can check
Yeah,
tomorrow.
that's fine, but just the website or whatever. And then in point 3, perhaps we should just say that the notification explains the significance of the day, as in the significance of the day being about all of these celebrations that we've had, rather than
Significance of Hunters Hill Day.
of Hunters Hill Day, yes, rather than July 31. Because if we celebrate if we explain the significance of July 31, all we're talking about is the most recent battle.
Yeah, I'm happy to accept that as well.
Thank you.
So if the mover is happy to accept those amendments, then that's all I need to speak.
Thank you. Are you happy to incorporate them in your original motion, Councillor Williams?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think that that's appropriate, and it's never intended that the state be divisive. So I think that helps clarify the situation.
The seconder was Councillor Sanderson, I think. Is that correct? Are you happy with those? Thank you.
Quick
Question, Councillor Collins.
I'm not very clear about the consultation part. It's been called Hunters Hill Day. The date is not up for discussion. What exactly are we consulting about?
Councillor Williams, it was your motion. Would you like to clarify?
What we're consulting about is, does the community value having a Hunters Hill Day? And we'll get a whole lot of suggestions in that will help us clarify and define the day. I've said all along that this is a celebration of our shared values and the battles that have defined us. And I think that needs to be explained in our consultation process, and to encourage the community to come forward with how they would like to celebrate it, either individually or collectively. So I don't see there any real issue with consultation. I think it's healthy and useful, and will help us consolidate the views around this day, and the community will then have a better understanding of what we're trying to do by having a broad consultation. People will hear about it, have a chance to think about it, have a chance to contribute thoughts about it. But in my way of looking at this, it is about the shared values and the battles that have defined us, and I think we can write a very concise history or précis around that will help the community understand why we value the area and what we have as shared values.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further clarifications or questions? So a motion has been accepting your amendments. So Councillor Williams accepted your amendments. We've got that seconded. And it is to broaden the consultation, to change 31st of July in item 3 to the day. Is that correct?
Hunters Hill Day.
To significance of Hunters Hill Day. All right.
Sorry, I'm just confused.
Another question?
Yeah, just
Councillor
a question. So just to confirm, 31st of July is not up for consultation, is that right?
That's
You're
the way
taking it
that
out
reads
of
there,
three.
that's
No, it
correct.
is.
No, it's
So-
up for consultation. You may well, if I may, Mr Mayor,
Sure.
you may well, this motion suggests that it be on the 31st of July. You may well get submissions from the committee saying it shouldn't be on the 31st of July.
Okay.
The word is propose,
Yep.
not declare.
All right. Any further questions, clarifications? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried. Thank you.
Against? Who is against?
Just one. Yeah. All right, item 3.2, single-use plastics. Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Crassoy. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this motion is to support and acknowledge the ongoing efforts of our waste management team around the work that they are doing for single-use plastics. And to also show the community that as a council we are willing to lead by example on this issue. And we will do this by specifically pledging to eliminate single-use plastic consumption in our council events and in events that are held on our public land. As I've mentioned in the report, our municipality is uniquely positioned in between two of Sydney's major waterways, and that is of course the Lane Cove River and the Parramatta Rivers. And single-use plastics are one of the major contributors to environmental damage and degradation of our waterways, and are a major threat to our local flora, fauna and our marine life. By targeting single-use plastics and incorporating the specific banning of them in our existing events policies, we give the policies that we have in place the extra gravitas they need to send a strong message to our community. By highlighting this in a motion, we show that as a council we are serious about it. And I do acknowledge that our waste management and events coordinators have done a fantastic job with very limited resources, I might say, to advance awareness around waste and sustainability. And you can see that in the General Manager's notes and the work that is being done by Kate Alder and her team. And this year's Mookaboola event had a very strong emphasis on reducing plastic consumption, but we cannot hope to partner with other councils and businesses, and indeed our community, in eliminating plastics unless we lead by example and show that we are prioritising this issue. There are a number of other councils that have moved to eliminate and phase out single-use plastics. But in my mind, phasing out is somewhat tokenistic and does not provide for an end game. As a small council with limited events, we should be able to achieve the complete elimination. And this sends a strong message to other councils that they can achieve it too. Now, other councils who have moved to the complete elimination of single-use plastics, and the leader in this field is actually Northern Beaches Council. And I didn't get a chance to attach this to my motion, but they have an entire, just a one-page policy on single-use plastics. We won't have them in our events. And then they also have another policy, waste minimisation for functions and events approved by council. We prohibit the sale of all single-use plastics. So they are the leaders. There shouldn't be any reason why we shouldn't be a leader in this field either. And I do note that we have been a leader in sustainability for a number of years, as evidenced by the General Manager, including quite an old motion from 2003. So while we have long had policies in place around biodegradable and recyclable products, there is a real public awareness campaign gaining around the term single-use plastics. And I think we should adopt these terms into our policies. And so I would urge Council to consider this motion and to show the community that we are serious about working alongside them to tackle a very important environmental issue.
Thank you, Councillor.
And I'm happy to table these if anyone wants to have a look at the very simple single-use plastics policy by the Northern Beaches
That's not
Council.
for consideration at the moment, is it? Councillor McLaughlin? They're not for consideration at the moment, are they?
No.
The other documents, all right. So does anybody like to speak against?
Question.
Question, Councillor Miles.
Through you, Mr Mayor, to Councillor McLaughlin. Implementing a formal policy of no, how does the policy that you're proposing differ from the policies that the General Manager has put in this report? And obviously there's quite a lot of detail in here about our existing policies and what Council's already doing to combat the use of single-use plastic products. How do you differ? How does what you're proposing differ from what is already Council policy?
Well, it's an updating of the policy. So at the moment, the policy reads, plastic bags and styrofoam are banned from all events. And it also talks about all events are required to use catering material that is either reusable, returnable, recyclable or compostable. But
So how does that differ from your motion if that's our current policy? What are we updating?
We're actually specifying that we don't want plastic straws, we don't want plastic bottles. We encourage you to use glass where possible. It's just putting the single-use plastics into the policy and specifying that we won't accept them in our events.
Including reusable plastics,
That's
like
right.
bottles and things.
Yes, where possible. You can bring your own bottle.
Things that aren't single use.
That's right.
And
So it's just updating the policy to reflect the current terminology that everybody is using, all the other councils are using on this issue.
Another question, if you could, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Miles.
I'm just thinking of the knock-on effects here. So if you're proposing that it's included in our hiring policy, therefore someone who goes and hires out Clark's Point, for example, for an event, they use single-use plastic products. What are you proposing, that they are fined, that they are reprimanded in some way, that if a business that is operating at Mukabulla, for example, and they use single-use plastic products, a coffee lid or a coffee cup, is there going to be a fine? Is there going to... This is my problem, that there is not enough information in here. What are you proposing in that respect?
I'm proposing that the policy is there and that the policy, as I understand it, and you might be able to give me some guidance here, Mr. General Manager, through you, Mr. Mayor, is that policy promotes the idea of encourages people to actually do this. So therefore, we don't fine them, as I understand it.
We have no enforcement.
We have no enforcement proceedings, but it's a mechanism whereby you encourage users in a very strong way to follow our policies and to adopt our policies.
So does that answer your question, Councillor Miles?
Not really, because if there's no bite to adopting this policy, and I'm again just trying to think through the knock-on effects, and perhaps this, as I may be suggesting in a moment, is deferred for a report, so that we do get an understanding of what implications this has. I don't want to get into a situation where we adopt this policy and then someone at Mukabulla gets fined or something happens and we as council don't know about it. I'm just thinking that perhaps for us to think this through before adopting the policy itself, it might be worth getting a council report on single-use plastics.
I think, if I could, Mr. Mayor,
Please.
through you, I think what we're trying to do, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Murdoch, I think what we're trying to do is just to bring this to the forefront of people's thinking. It's a bit like get rid of the plastic bags in the supermarket. But the way that they're enforcing it is they're not having the plastic bags, so it's making you bring your own individual bags. And I guess it's in a way this is similar. The events we run ourselves, it's easy. We can have single-use plastics. The events that somebody else is running, so let's just say there's a wedding at Clark's Point, for example. When they sign the hiring agreement, they will know in big bold letters, we want them to use single-use.
We don't want them to use
single-use, and we would encourage them, and we would hope that they would do that. It might take a little while for different people for that to filter through for different people, but again, using Clark's Point as an example, a lot of that is done with outside catering services. They're already under pressure to do those sorts of things as well. Mukabulla, there's a specific hiring agreement that everyone's got to sign to get a stall. That will clearly say what we expect of them. And I would think for the first one, maybe even the first two Mukabullas, where people are not complying, we'd sort of go, come on, this is what we're trying to do as a community here. We want you to do these things.
That's what I'm asking. What's that?
Yeah.
Well, that's all it'll be, because we have no power, right? We have no power to enforce or fine. So it's really about encouraging people and publicising it, but also doing it ourselves. But leading by example is the best way to get anybody to do anything, really.
Agreed.
And
Councillor Miles, does that answer your question?
It does, but
Clarified.
Yeah, my point. Yeah, clarified. I'll talk to the motion.
And if I might just also add that, we have had plastic bans and styrofoam banned from all our events for quite some time, since 2008.
My earlier point. Yes.
Yes. So what I'm saying is, it's all about education. It's all about reinforcing it. And if you reinforce it very specifically in your policies, then hopefully people will get the message.
So Councillor McLaughlin, would item G say to update all council policies that are currently in place as well? Review and update of
Well, yes, it
appropriate
could,
policies.
yes.
That would then
So when-
supersede the previous.
Yeah, so when I say
Documents.
implementing a formal policy, I actually drafted this before the policies were all attached. It would be updating the formal policy or updating the policy.
So Councillor
no
Miles
single use.
suggested, if I might just go back and ask a question, and maybe we defer this, gather some extra information and come back with a proper detailed policy. Is that something you still want to pursue, Councillor Miles?
I think if we're amending the policy, and you can read in the attachments that it's actually quite a detailed policy, I wouldn't mind seeing what it is we're adopting before we adopt it. That's all I'm suggesting. I agree with the initiative. It's the way councils are going. I agree that the policy probably does need changing to broaden the scope, but I would like to see the policy in its entirety with the amendments, if possible, before we adopt them, because in essence we're adopting something that we don't know what it's going to look like at the other end. And I'd like to know the details. I'd like to know, for example, promoting a bag swap station. Is there, I would have thought that there would be a sanitary issue with the bag swap station, depending on whether or not reusable bags are cleaned when they go in and out. I don't know.
It happens in Mako.
It may do, but that's my point. I'd like to know what the policy looks like before it actually comes back to us and we vote on it. I get the in principle. I understand it. It's a great initiative, but I'd like to see the detail before we vote on it.
Thank you. Anybody like to speak for the
Or is
motion?
that an
Can I
amendment?
ask a question, please?
Well, not quite. Yes, you can ask a question, clarification. I don't think Councillor Miles has actually moved as an amendment at this stage, so I'll take it as speaking against. Councillor Williams.
Not against.
All right, you haven't
Can I ask
moved.
a question?
Sure you can.
A point of clarification. After listening to Councillor Miles's comments and the responses from Councillor McLaughlin, are we talking about a new formal policy here, or are we talking about amending our existing policies? Because I think the General Manager's point on the other side of the page there is we do have policies. If it's inserting an extra page, what are we doing here? Is it a new policy, or are we just amending not only the sustainability policy, but a whole range of policies where this would be relevant?
Hiring.
I can probably answer that.
Councillor McLaughlin.
This did come out before the policies were attached. So, as I said, I think I'd be happy to have an amendment where we update our existing policies to reflect no single-use plastic products.
Councillor Miles.
Sorry to do this to you, Councillor. I will formally move that it's deferred for the policies to be as amended within the spirit of the motion, to be amended and brought back in their entirety so that we can read through the what I'm assuming changes to the sustainability policy and the hiring policy and perhaps knock-on effects to other policies.
Posting intended. All right, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Collins.
I don't need to speak to that. I think it's quite self-explanatory.
All right. Anybody like to speak against the deferment of the... Councillor Crassley.
I think I like what Councillor McLaughlin has suggested here about updating Council's existing policies in relation to single-use plastic, etc. I think that in that process, I don't think that we should defer it now without agreeing to this. So if we're agreeing to update our existing policies, perhaps we can, I'm not quite sure how to word it, but the perfect is the enemy of good, basically. So if we put too much time and energy into drilling it down to dots and I's and T's, then we're going to miss the spirit of the intention, which is to bring our 2003 plus policies from so long ago up to speed, to include single-use plastics, which is where it's at, and in the long run, other things in our community, which is why I love the part about working with the businesses and working with other councils. Reinforcing our existing policies, just updating them. We're not talking about a total rewrite. We're just talking about updating our existing policies. I don't think that requires a deferment. I think it requires us as council to say, yes, it's time, and can we please have our policies updated? And I would imagine in that, I would have thought as part of that, you'd need to come back to us to go, is this what you were looking for, councillors? And then we would all say, yes, that's what we were looking for. I worry that if we defer it, how long is it going to go on? I mean, Carol's is coming. I know as a member of the events committee that, Esther works very hard on this, and that our waste officer does as well. I know that what Esther already does in what she does is use our existing policies to justify her position in the information she gives stallholders, where she, because of the policies she has, she is able to share links to adequate suppliers and options for people and cover our bins with recycling and fill Mukabula with a lot of education. And there was a lot at Mukabula, and I think there's a report coming to us from Good for the Hood, who have shared a lot of information around that. We're just talking about updating our existing policies to reinforce single-use plastic. Coles and Woolies don't fine people if they walk in and use a single-use plastic bag. It's us as a council saying single-use plastic, particularly where we live, is not good enough, and we don't support it. And here's all the ways you don't have to support it either, to our event team who already do it, and to anyone who comes to our suburb. I really worry that deferring it, you're just going to muddy it, and we're just talking about tidying up and bringing it into the future. So.
Thank you. Would anybody like to speak for?
Kind of a question.
Councillor Collins, question?
Of Councillor McLaughlin, through you, Mr. Mayor. Had you read the Sustainable Event Management Policy before you drafted this motion?
No, I hadn't, and in fact, I thought that we didn't have plastic bags included, which is why I specifically wanted them included.
Okay, so this is. Oh, okay, if I might just speak.
Councillor Collins, you're speaking against
for
the
deferral.
For the amended.
It appears here that this motion has been drafted having not read the policy we already have in place. We're already doing all these things. I completely support, not using single-use plastics, but there is nothing here in this motion that we're not doing here, and I'm quite happy to be told otherwise, and I will support anything that will add to our strength of our policy. But really, I think the only thing this motion will achieve is probably a bit of good publicity for Councillor McLaughlin.
I don't agree with that. In point of order, I don't think that is the intention at all.
All right, so would anybody like to speak against the amendment to defer? Anybody would like to speak against that? Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, I would. Have I already spoken against it? No, I didn't.
No.
Oh, you did, that's right, I got up to say. I don't agree that's the case. The actual existing policy I do know about because I have looked at it when I looked at Mukabula and other events that we've had. So what I'm trying to do is bring it up to date with the way that other councils are expressing their policies around this issue, and that is to bring it up to date with the term single-use plastics, which is which has gained a lot of momentum as a result of the war on waste and a whole lot of other initiatives that other councils are doing. The idea behind the motion is actually to also promote further partnerships with other councils on this issue, and that we bring our council to the forefront of what other councils are trying to achieve. We're up to date with other councils, and we're all on the same page about single-use plastics. So yes, there is an existing policy, but it hasn't been looked at since 2011. So there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't, as Councillor Crassoy, simply bring our policies up to date and incorporate the term single-use plastics, which is a term that everybody is using, everybody understands and recognises, and they understand when you talk about single-use plastics that these are the types of things that we don't want to see in our events anymore, if possible. And we encourage partnerships with our businesses and our community groups and schools to all have a similar policy in place around the use of single-use plastics. So it's not good publicity for Council McLaughlin, it's good publicity for our council. Using the term single-use plastics is a no-brainer in the current climate that we are in.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anybody like to speak for the amendment?
I'd just like to clarify a point, if I can.
Clarification.
Yeah. So around the single-use plastics and bottles, for example, in implementing it, it's single-use. So if we had, by endorsing a policy like this, if you had an opportunity to bring in a bottle drop-off or a recycling program, there's plenty of companies doing cups that you bring back, and so you buy your coffee for $4 and you bring the cup back and you get $1 back. There's organisations doing that all around the world at the moment, and there are some in Sydney. Same with bottles. So the stallholders are encouraged to sell something in a bottle that people can take it back to a drop-off bay and get a reimbursement. So we're talking about single use. Coffee cup lids are recyclable. Coffee cups aren't, but coffee cup lids are. So we're talking about single use plastics. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Like
So would anybody like to speak
balloons.
for?
Could I just...
Anybody like to speak for? Just a moment. Does anybody like to speak for the amendment to defer? Clarification, Councillor Sanderson. Question? Who's your question?
My question through you, Mr Mayor, to Councillor Miles, is
Thank you.
How long is the deferment of the
Good question.
implementation?
I would imagine that the council staff could do this before the next council meeting.
I can do it tonight if you like.
Yeah, that's what I mean, but I'd like to
If I may,
policy in
Mr.
front of
Mayor,
us.
to be honest,
General Manager.
unless I'm reading all of this wrong, and I don't think I am, all that needs to happen is with these two policies, we will add the words somewhere, no single use of plastic products at all council events, including plastic bags, straws, bottles, cups and balloons. That's all we're going to do.
So the term single use is the only term not in our policy
That's
at
it.
the moment.
That's it.
Not specified.
Not specified. It's not
Fair enough.
specified. So, for instance, if you look at, just make it easy. If you look at the, if you look at
Councillor Siscoe.
page. Right, if you look at page 7, up the top there's considerations in implementing this policy include actions 2. Number 4 will become include no single-use plastic products at all council events, including plastic. That's what it'll say. And if you go to the events policy, under policy guidelines, we'll add another guideline that says no single use of plastic products at all council events, including plastic bags. That's it. That's all that needs to happen.
Okay.
In terms of this motion, there's some other things in the motion that are not relevant to the actual policies. So, for instance, the working with NESROC, that's fine. That's straightforward. The bag swap, we'll have to look at how we might do that. Promoting the initiatives, well, let's just continue what we're already doing. Investing opportunity grants, and we're doing that all the time as well. So, I think that's all it needs to happen.
Okay, so
Unless I'm reading it
wrong. Can I just check? So, Councillor, you're asking that the policies be amended, brought back to us to sign off on with the amendments highlighted.
Yes.
So we can all be clear what the amendments are. Is that correct?
Yes. May I suggest, Mr Mayor, that we on the first part of the motion, as in 1A, that Council amend the existing policy of no use single products at council events, including plastic bags, straws, bottle cups, and balloons, and that the amended policy be brought back to council for adoption, and then the rest of the motion gets adopted as per the motion tonight.
So,
The A and B that we're talking about.
Yep.
so A and B, or just A to be brought back for amended policies to be checked, is that what you're saying?
Yes, essentially.
And all the rest to be adopted tonight?
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So,
If the second is happy.
so that would you be happy to incorporate that in your motion, councillor? Do we bring back item A with the amended policies? That we adopt B, C,
Why do you need him to come
D?
back?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm just trying to clarify. It's either that or a deferral. So we're at that point now where we either do
Well, no,
that
it's
or we
not.
defer it.
No, it's not. I'm still pushing forward with the motion.
All right. Well,
Um,
so if there's any further speakers on the deferral, I'll put councillor's motion for a deferral, because that's what his motion is, and we have a seconder for that motion. Unless, in terms of process, I've got it wrong, councillor Williams.
No, you've got.
All right. So I'd like to deal with that if you don't mind. Let's
Right.
deal with the deferral of this. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against?
To defer.
So defer. Those in favour of deferring it? Against? That's lost. Okay. So we're back to your motion, I think, Councillor McLaughlin.
I've already spoken to my motion. I'm happy to have a right of reply when.
Did you want to make any changes to that motion, or would
Well,
you
I
like
did,
it just as it is?
I did suggest that we just update our existing policies to include
Okay, so where would you like those words?
in 1A.
1A, update existing policies to include no single-use plastic products, etc. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right. All right, just one moment. Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I was wondering if the mover of the motion would, to expedite this matter, accept the suggestions from the General Manager in terms of the wording, so that we can agree on the whole thing tonight without any need to come back, because the wording is pretty simple and pretty straightforward and very skillfully put together. I'd also inquire of Councillor McLaughlin, because there's probably a bit of misunderstanding about what's intended in D. Would you be interested in adding into that the bag swap system as currently used in Lane Cove? Because that's a model that we can overcomes all the concern.
I would, but it is just an example. It's not, I'm not putting that in, I'm just suggesting that as that's one initiative that could be brought forward, but certainly.
But as
Lane
part
Cove,
of the example.
I'd be
just-
happy to accept that.
Get some word you can read. All right, so let's.
So if everyone's happy, then after we'll have.
I'll come back to you, Councillor.
For example, installate bag swap station at Hunters Hill Village and Glaze Recycling and Lane Cove.
No, such as Lane Cove use.
Brackets as per the example Lane Cove.
So
As currently used in Lane Cove.
As currently used in Lane Cove.
And currently used in Lane Cove.
That's what I want to hear from. As currently used in Lane Cove.
Yep.
Now, Councillor Sanderson has got a question or a clarification. Councillor Sanderson.
Just a very minor point on the drafting, the number one at the start is redundant because there is no number two, etc.
That's
Thank
true.
Thank you.
Let's turn the page go.
All right. Councillor McLaughlin, I'll ask the General Manager to read out the changes that you've made to your motion.
Council amended its current policies to include no single-use plastic products at all council events, including plastic bags, straws, bottles, cups and balloons. That's in A. And D would be amended to include, after the words, Gladesville Shopping Village and currently used in Lane Cove, to encourage shoppers, blah, blah, blah.
As currently.
You need to do the last one to be checked.
No, that's
As
covered by A
currently.
now.
Okay. And you had a suggestion that
As
something else
currently
that
used.
should be added, Councillor Williams. What was that?
No, just a point of clarification, Mr Mayor. I thought we'd got to the point that we were adopting the words in the policy, not asking for it to be gone away and added.
Well, that's what, to me, as I now read 1, council amend current policies to include no, you can, that's what we're going to do.
That's just the point.
Yep,
Yeah.
okay.
The extra dot point.
So is that what your intention is, Councillor McLaughlin? So we've amended A. We've taken away item 1 from the top of the notice of motion. We've amended item D, and there are no, which relates to the lane code. Nothing else has changed. Is that correct? All right. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Crassoy, do you agree to that change, Councillor Crassoy?
I think Councillor Collins has a question.
Question.
Councillor Collins, question.
B, extending the policy to include all third-party events. Is that already in existence?
Yes.
So it's really probably just changing.
So I'll just go in and add the words no single-use plastic products. We'll also go into the hiring event, the hiring policy, which is events on council
We'll
land.
deal with this question.
So under events on council land, which is page 13, where it's got policy guidelines, we'll just add a number 11 or another number that says no single-use plastic products at the event, including plastic bags, straws, bottles, cups and balloons.
Does that answer your question, Councillor?
It does.
Councillor Sanderson.
Just in the process of going through this, I did look at the policy of a number of other councils, and I wonder whether with that list we need to make it a little bit more exhaustive. I noticed that other councils, they've included bottles, cups, cutlery, crockery and bags, so that there are other plastic items that we haven't got in there, aren't there?
It's already in there.
Bags are there.
Crockery.
It says plastic products, right,
In the policy.
including, right? So it doesn't exclude any of those things.
No.
It just says plastic products.
Oh,
We could go on and on and on forever,
No, I know.
putting in what the this.
Councillors, do we need any further discussion on this matter, or can I put the motion? Councillor Williams,
Can I just briefly speak to the matter?
please do.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I think this is an important issue and I congratulate Councillor McLaughlin on bringing it forward, and I think we've come to a happy resolution tonight on the wording of the policy changes and where the changes should come, and a whole series of other initiatives that will help publicise this issue. I'd like to raise the issue that which came out of the National Congress that was held, where this issue around recyclables and plastics in particular was raised. And I think it's important for Council to walk the talk. And there's a whole range of initiatives around plastics and other recyclables that Council should be engaging with, particularly in terms of its procurement policies and a range of other policies. So I think it's important we get this in place now, but I don't think it needs to stop here. There's a range of other initiatives that Council needs to consider, particularly around the recyclables and embedding that recyclable concept within our procurement so that we're buying things that are sustainable, utilising recyclables wherever we can, and eliminating wasteful packaging, which I think I don't agree with where the supermarkets are going with their, and actually they have banned them, so you can't use a single-use plastic bag in a shopping centre, but you can use their bulky version of a reusable plastic bag, which I fished 2 out of the river the other day. They're going to become just as much of a problem as the other one. So dealing step by step, but I think we need to get the whole picture on the table, and I would like to talk to Councillor McLaughlin and maybe come forward with another iteration of this that steps us into other aspects of sustainability, particularly around plastic.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
I was just going to have a right of reply.
If you need it, yes, you can. Do you feel you need it?
Yes, just very briefly.
Councillor McLaughlin?
I did With the motion tonight, this was the first step, and I absolutely agree with Councillor Williams. I think there's a number of other, initiatives that could be led by this council. We have a very long, proud history of heritage and conservation, and we should really be leading on this issue, and conservation should be one of them. So I think that this is the first step in a lot of discussion that we should be having. It's a very hot topic at the moment. But that's not to say it's a topic that's going away either. So, the calico bag way back in 2003 was a starting point, but there's a lot of momentum on this issue. So I think we just need to, as a council, take a very strong leadership role in promoting sustainability.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. And it is a very good initiative, and we do need to work hard on it. Councillor Williams, I'm wondering if some things that came out of that conference relate to this topic, whether we could workshop them together, talk about those issues. I think it was part of a presentation at the conference recently.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there was a lot of initiatives at that conference, which I think we could add to our way of doing business. So yes, be happy to look at that more closely.
Good.
As Councillor McLaughlin said, there's just a broad range of issues that we're still to address around sustainability.
There are. Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Sorry I have to leave early. Bit of a crisis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Item 3.3. Formal review of 1050 vegetation clearing code. Councillor Williams.
I'll move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Moved Councillor Williams, seconded. Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is not an initiative of mine. This reflects the mood of councils in our region, and it's something that I think really does need to be addressed as a part of a broader package of what we need to do in terms of preserving our tree canopy in Hunters Hill. Hunters Hill has one of its values is its tree canopy, and one of the important aspects that make Hunters Hill quite unique is its treed environment and its garden environment. There's a range of factors that are currently eroding that tree canopy. And I know I disagree with the General Manager on this issue, and I will, and I am in the process of going through and documenting every tree that's been lost in the municipality on aerial photographs so that I can prove my point. But we are under pressure, either through this government policy of 1050 or through the complaint development doesn't allow for trees. And I think council needs to sharpen up its policies and its consideration of trees in the municipality, how we can maintain them and how we can actually build our tree stock in Hunters Hill. So there's a range of aspects, but I think this is an important one. This policy was brought in by the government, and I believe it's having a significant impact on tree canopies, not only here in parts of Hunters Hill, but also across the region and across the state. The motions here by other councils reflect a common concern and a common shared value in terms of what trees contribute. And Mayor Ruddock of Hornsby gave a very impassioned presentation at a local government New South Wales summit, Northern Summit. He introduced, because it was hosted at his council, and he spoke for the best part of a half hour just on trees in Hornsby, and part of the details of his concerns and views are in the attachment to the motion. So right across Sydney at the moment, we're losing our tree canopy in a large amount. And this is just one aspect that's contributing to that. I think the policy of the government for the 1050 vegetation clearing has now been in place long enough for it to be reviewed thoroughly and to be more effectively defined, I believe. So it's important for Hunters Hill to share and support surrounding councils on this issue. And as I say, I flagged this, as I did with the sustainability issue, as one step in a fairly lengthy process, because I have concerns and would like to revisit our tree policy in Hunters Hill, both for streets, reserves and private land. The need for us to be able to encourage, as was done many years ago, for corridors within private land as well as in public land. I think the initiative that Mayor Ruddock is driving in Hornsby, they're looking at planting 25,000 trees in the next couple of years in their municipality, because development has just denuded what was once a very treed environment. I think we need to look very closely at our significant tree register. I don't think it's been given sufficient attention. We need to do some thorough analysis of the tools we have available to us, and I'm happy to help. I have dealt in state policy on native vegetation clearing. I can help use those drone images and whatever other historic images to get some clarity and definition about what is happening in our municipality. I recently received several correspondence from residents, particularly where compliant development is now taking place in the municipality, pleading for council to do something about the loss of tree canopy in that particular area. But it's evident right across the municipality. So I've covered a broad range of topics here, but the motion today is about supporting Lane Cove and Hornsby in their motion, which they're requesting the Local Government New South Wales include in their conference, and that's specific about the 1050 vegetation clearing.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to speak against this motion? For the motion? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, I will speak for the motion. Undertaking a formal review of the 1050, obviously this was quite a contentious policy when it first came out, and it was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to the terrible bushfires in the Blue Mountains. They had reviewed the policy from 30 metres from your house to now it's about 3 metres from your house is the complying area around your house that the 1050 applies to. There's no reason why it shouldn't be reviewed. Obviously, the points that Councillor Williams has put here are quite sensible. Whether it has had any hazard reduction as to bushfires, well, whether that applies in Hunters Hill, who knows? And it has had an effect, and I think that we've had certain cases prosecuted, some successfully and some unsuccessfully, about the removal of trees, and some under the 1050 legislation. I'm not necessarily, against clearing trees where they're required in bushland and by farmers to actually reduce the risk of bushfires. But why there is a bushfire hazard in Hunters Hill based off of this legislation, it's always been a little bit of a tenuous distinction. But where it's appropriate, clearing vegetation to have breakers for bushfires is sensible. Perhaps not in Hunters Hill. So I think it's a good initiative by Councillor Williams. And obviously having to listen to the Honourable Philip Ruddock for an hour or half an hour has had a great impact on you.
It has. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Knowledgeable man.
You would like to speak against? I've also listened to Councillor Ruddock for half an hour on the matter. I think it might have been the Nesrock meeting we went to, the very first Nesrock meeting we attended. And he was really quite concerned about the amount of trees that have been lost from that municipality, in particular because of the application of the rule widely used for clearing land. All right, so if there are no further clarifications, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. 4.1, the Delegated Authority Report.
Second.
Moved. Moved. Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Is there any discussion, any clarifications on this? Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, page 42 at the bottom there. Again, it's about trees. It's DA 2018-1061. Removal of 5 trees with planting a replacement of 1 tree. I would appreciate more details on that as to what the logic is. What are we losing and why only 1 tree to replace it, and what type of tree? It is a common theme through this report. Trees are identified on the previous page on 41, removal of 1 tree, bang. No replacement, no discussion about what that tree is and why it needs. And actually the determination in the previous one about a tree was quite confusing. So I just again ask if there could be some more clarity and details as to what is being approved or refused. I think the refusals are fairly detailed, but the approvals, some of them need a bit more logic than what's given in the report at the moment.
Are you looking at the second one you mentioned? Is that 1049? DA 2018-1049?
That's where I get confused about the wording in the refusal, but I'm glad it's been refused.
Yes.
But the other one I was referring to is 1036, the next one along. There's removal of 1 tree.
And approved.
What is the thinking there in terms of 5 trees equals 1 in the other 106 one, and 1 can just be removed without replacement? To me, I just
understand the
need
reason.
more information as to the logic and the reasoning behind the decision.
Okay, good point. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Sanderson.
Mr. Mayor, one of the ones that I'm a little bit confused about is DA 2016 1107-1. The landscaped area there is only 40.6. There's no explanation as to, there is additions, so there's no explanation as to whether that non-compliance is an improvement which we're normally allowed, or whether it's been worsened by the development. That'd be useful to know as well.
Right, so you're just looking for additional information. Unfortunately, with Mr. Karipa's away, I can't get you a quick answer, but we'll come back to that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just
Councillor Williams.
I'm sure in the staff's report they do detail this and do critique what Councillor Sanders has just mentioned and what I've been looking for in these reports. So I don't think it's asking for additional work by the staff. It's just asking for a bit of a cut and paste out of their reports where they're making those decisions and the logic behind it, which they already articulated in the reports.
Yep, understood.
And that's one of the disadvantages in this new system, where we're not involved in that decision-making process. We don't get full information that helps us understand the decisions.
Yes, you're quite right. Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. 5.1, Progress Report, Hunts Hill Disability Action and Inclusion Plan. Councillor Williams, Councillor Crassoy, Councillor Williams.
Pretty sure
I'm pretty sure
she's had
Councillor
a hand up for quite a while.
Point of clarification.
Sorry, I was reading the document. You probably have to stand up if you want to.
I thought it was just polite to invite him to stand.
Well, I was probably looking down. So, we'll put it Councillor Crassoy, Councillor Williams. We'll swap them around. Councillor Crassoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one clarification that the subject, the progress report of the Hunters Hill Disability Inclusion Action Plan. Just the wording. It was a real pleasure to listen to Kate Cuddy talk to this report that Margaret Kelly has written. And as she humbly said at the end, I think we've made a start. I'd say if that's her idea of making a start, then we can nickname her Winks, because she's out the gates and going hard on this. I love that there's partnering with other councils, a lot of partnering with people in the community and inviting people in the community to participate. It's great to see that council's already been involved in the Northern Business Awards on it. What I like about the word inclusion, more than just the word disability, is it implies designing or planning to the whole, to everyone. And when you plan to meet everyone's needs, everyone is naturally included, and you capture people with disabilities as well. For example, it says in here about ongoing upgrade of our footpaths and ramps, etc. When you upgrade our footpaths and ramps, it means that seniors, people in wheelchairs, me on my bike or with my pull-along shopping bag can access it. So when you design to inclusion, you actually get a better design. So I like that all these points in here are being addressed, particularly the work with the Happy Hens at Bedlam Bay, and I believe there's a report coming to council at the next meeting on that, which is great. So I would just like to congratulate, and I'm glad that that's actually a recommendation in the report that Margaret Kelly has made, that we congratulate our Age and Disability Coordinator for their outstanding progress made on the implementation of this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to speak against? Anybody for? Any clarifications? Councillor Sanderson.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd just like to make the point that with Councillor Crassor talking about inclusion, it hasn't been put to the Access Committee as yet, but there is a proposal that the name of the Access Committee will be changed to Access and Inclusion. Unfortunately, Kate is brilliant with this. She works, didn't include that in the agenda at the last meeting, but I expect that will occur at the next meeting.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you.
I think
So 9.1.
No, I don't accept.
Councillor Williams.
Popcorn. What's a standoff?
I'd like to receive and note this report, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Is there any
Want me to
further?
speak to it? Is there a seconder?
Do we have a seconder? No, I'm afraid we don't.
Oh, dear.
Yes, we do. I'm sorry, my mistake.
No, we don't know. I'm
Councillor
getting
Miles.
quick in.
Councillor Miles.
I'm going to move an alternate recommendation, Mr Mayor, that the Bushland Management Working Party be dissolved by council, and that council establish a new committee under a Bushland Working Party, the same terms of reference, to be chaired by a councillor, to include another councillor, and for expressions of interest to go out to community members to participate in that committee. You will note in the body of the report actually request that they become a committee of council. That will be my recommendation. I believe that number one in the recommendation as read, we are obviously cognizant of our requirements as a trustee of Boronia Park. I don't think that's a recommendation that I would support, because we are doing that anyway, and number two I think has been dealt with previously in this meeting.
So you would like to, your motion is that we dissolve this committee,
This working party.
this working party. Thank you for clarification. Seconded, Councillor Collins. Councillor Miles.
Mr Mayor, you will note in the body
So
of the...
before you start,
And there are a couple of other things to your motion too.
just before you start, sorry. So the original motion received a note, didn't get a seconder, is that right?
Did.
That's right. Lapsed. by the boldness.
So you had another part to your motion too, that goes out for the election of council.
Yes. So if you want me to clarify,
Yes, please do.
That the council form a bushland and sustainability. What was your?
No, I want a Parks and Trees.
The council form a Parks and Trees Committee, and that it is chaired by a councillor, and is there's two councillors on the committee, one to chair, and that community representatives are asked to join the committee by the normal consultation process of it.
Could you just give me a minute, and I'd like to read it back to make sure we're dealing with it as accurately as we can. Accurately as we can.
That would
The only thing that we're missing is what are the terms of reference for the Parks and Trees Committee? What's their charter?
What is the charter of the Bushland Management Working Party?
Well, you just want to make it the same. That's
Which we can amend at a future date anyway. Can we not?
Can the charter be brought back?
The Councillor McLaughlin is suggesting we call it the Bushland Parks and Trees Committee, which I am happy with. Advisory Committee. And perhaps as a point 3, we can have council reviews the charter of the committee.
Current working party.
Working party. No, the committee of the committee.
Of the current.
No, the current, because we're forming a new committee.
No, the one that exists at the moment. You started off by saying we'd use that.
Yes.
And now you want to review that.
Yes.
So it's the one that's existing in place as of today for the Bushland Management Working Party. Is that correct?
It is.
Okay.
To broaden the scope to presumably what the committee will be formed to do. Councillor Williams, I know, has some ideas in that respect.
Right, well, just give us a moment. We'll see if we can capture the words correctly.
okay. So it would be that the Bushland Management Working Party is dissolved, and council establish a Bushland Parks and Trees Advisory Committee with one councillor to chair and one other councillor, together with one other councillor. 2 would be the committee representation is invited, and 3, council review the charter of the new committee.
How many community representatives did you have in mind?
Is that in the charter, Mr.
Well, it's one from each bushland working group. Divided from each bushland working group, however we do that.
All right.
And council officers, as required.
Oh, you don't have to put that in.
No.
And that was moved Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Collins.
Yep.
So Councillor Miles.
Mr. Mayor, we've talked for some time about this working party. I know that there was some angst in the last council about what it does, its reporting structure. I've had issues with its reporting to council this year. I think that for nothing more than the transparency of the working party come committee now, I think that councillors have to be involved. They have to know what the Bushland Working Party or committee is doing. Obviously, when we read these reports, they are participating in extensive plannings around Hunters Hill, which is fantastic. But I'd like some detail, and obviously having councillors' input in that process is something even the committee in point 6 of the report is asking for us to do. So I have no problem in suggesting that we dissolve the working party and form a committee where councillors are involved, the Bushland Working Group's involved, Jackie and the team at Council are involved as necessary. Obviously, that will be something that we can review as the committee is formed and works towards what is in its charter. I've had some issues with the way that these reports have been brought to us, and perhaps that the working party had been straying from its purpose. I think that if it is a Bushland Working Party or a Bushland committee that sticks to the bushland in Hunters Hill, I'm not saying that what they're doing is not valuable. It obviously is, but we just need to be made aware of what's going on, where the plantings are. I remember Councillor Bird particularly took up this issue last term. In relation to Boronia Park, there is a point 1 here which talks about the proposal for inclusive playground. There is also some suggestion there about the Hunters Hill Rugby Club's future on the site. I think that the group and the community need to be aware that Hunters Hill Council takes itself as its trustee of Boronia Park very seriously, that we are conscious of our status as a trustee of Boronia Park, and all that we are seeking to do now and in the future is to improve that facility as a trustee, and that means a variety of things, including looking after the bushland, but including improvements to the active and passive recreational spaces. So I am not quite sure what the first point in the original motion was trying to achieve. I think that it's time that this committee is formed, and I look forward to Councillor Orr's participation in the committee, and for the working party to transition into that committee neatly as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Would you like to speak against the motion?
I just have a question.
Question of who?
And which I don't really want to speak against the motion, or whether I need to put it as an amendment.
Who's your question of?
To Councillor Miles, through you, Mr. Mayor. I wondered whether Councillor Miles would consider adding a resident to the group that doesn't sit on another committee. Our Main Street committees have a residential representative on them, and I think it's sometimes good in a committee to have that diversity.
Question to the General Manager. How many members of the bushland groups are there? What is the number?
At the moment, I think it's 7 or 8, and they're all residents.
Can I suggest that the bushland groups are represented, and if there are 8, that four extra participants in the group are invited and they are residents? I think that's a valuable point.
For extra or additional?
Extra. Yeah.
That don't sit on
That aren't necessarily from those bushland working groups, but may be interested in participating in
Which means they'll float in.
initiatives.
Could I suggest that perhaps you might just keep that on hold until you review the charter?
Okay.
It's your opportunity.
Is that, or would you like to?
Oh no, it's your motion.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Cressler? You happy with that? Councillor Williams?
Mr. Mayor, just a question. If we're broadening the role of this committee away from just bushland, then we will need to have other expertise and other community representation on it. So I support Councillor Miles's view. We can't just reconstitute the working group into an advisory panel that has a broader responsibility without seeking other expertise and community input.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Mr Mayor, through you to the General Manager, is there a reason why we would wait until the review of the Charter, or is there, or can we put that into the motion? Because I do agree with both Councillor Crassoy and Councillor Williams that there has to be a broadening of the participation.
Yeah, I have no problem with that, but at the moment, number 2 says one committee representative is invited from each bushland working group. I agree with what, yes.
And equal participation by members of the community?
Well, the problem you've got, I think what you need to think about is, okay, when we look at the Charter, and I'm just straight off the top of my head here, if you're looking at other areas other than bushland, for example, and you're looking for some additional expertise to help you there, what sort of expertise are you looking for? Is it some sort of scientific expertise? Because when you invite applications, then you need to say, well, what is it that you want these people, what experience and qualifications do you want from these people?
We have to establish the Charter.
I amend the motion to the dissolution of the working party as one. Number 2, that council agree to form an advisory committee with the same title. That the charter of that advisory committee be brought to a council workshop for future adoption, with the view to advertising as appropriate for members of the advisory committee.
Yeah, could I suggest something else?
Mm-hmm.
One would stand, that is that the Bushland Management Working Party is dissolved, and council establish a Bushland, Parks and Trees Advisory Committee with a councillor and a councillor to chair and one other councillor, and then 2 would become council review the charter of the new committee and the committee membership.
Okay.
Very good. You happy with that, Councillor?
I'm happy with that.
Good. All right. Now, would you like to speak to that motion at this point?
I've spoken to that motion.
Right. The new motion?
Broadly.
All right. Is there anybody like to speak against the motion? For the motion? Councillor Crassoy, you were quick that time. Thank you.
You've got to be. I do want to speak for the motion.
Split second.
Because in reading the last several reports that have come to council, I feel that some of the questions that have been raised, things that have been discussed, they're all actually valid and very interesting. But I feel like a lot of it, the members of those groups would have left the meeting much more satisfied if they had a councillor at their meeting who has been present at all our council meetings and is aware of the work of all our other committees and has read the reports of all our other committees and knows what council is currently working on. I think it will really inform the committee more having a councillor there. So I think that's really important, and I commend you for as Councillor Williams said, bold move, and I commend you, and I think it'll make for a vibrant and valued committee going forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody like to speak against? For? Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I share the views that are being put at the moment. It is time to move on from the working panel to a more robust and structured advisory committee. I raised at previous council meeting my concern that the breadth of which this panel has been engaged in, it must consume enormous amount of their time. A lot of it's not focused on bushland per se, and it obviously consumes a lot of staff time. I also have a few issues with the Public Transport and Traffic Committee in a similar light. I think these, particularly advisory committees, should be advising council, not directing council. And I think advisory committees need to respond to council rather than initiate their own agenda. So I think it's timely that we move this issue along with parks and trees into a more collective process. A lot of the skills and requirements are common, but it needs to be more focused on the issues which council needs addressed. So I commend Councillor Miles's motion.
Thank you, councillor. Anybody like to speak against? Are we all done, councillors? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. 9.2, the minutes of the Hunters. You're not going to catch me again, councillor. Hunters Hill Resident Friendship Committee held the 25th of July 2018. Councillor Miles. Moved Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Williams. Councillor Miles.
Not necessarily, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody like to speak to this? Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I'll speak for the motion, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to congratulate the committee on their 30th anniversary dinner. I think it was an outstanding evening, enjoyed by all, and it was also coincided with a farewell for the students, and it was really fascinating to listen to each of the students get up and do a presentation. Some went for probably a bit too long, about 15 minutes, but they were passionate about their experience, passionate about their families, and they've certainly grown enormously in that time they've been here and the opportunity, and they've made friends that they'll keep for life. And there is connectivity between not only the students but also the families. They endure into the future as well. So I congratulate the committee on its exceptional work. It does give a very good avenue for our students, our local younger group who have some French understanding to really grow and engage with another culture. So again, I congratulate them on what they've been doing the last 30 years and thank them for what was a great evening and what is an ongoing and fantastic exchange program.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams, I understand that there's a much larger group exchanging next time.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can't give the numbers, but it is the interest.
16 perhaps?
Yes. Yeah, it was quite a large number. The biggest group we had was the first year, which was 30. That is very, very complicated and difficult to manage. So 16 is getting large, but it just shows there's enormous interest both in Le Vésinet and in Hunters Hill for this real life-changing opportunity which it gives not only to the students but to the families as well.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Just a question to you, Mr. Mayor. I did notice little sort of commemorative gifts for significant milestones. Did we present anything for the 30 years? Did we give anything, or did they present us with anything?
We wrote to their mayor, and I don't think there were any particular gifts that changed hands. We gave the students some gifts when they were here. I think we gave them things that they used while they were here too. So the gifts that they used. Councillor Williams, can you recall anything else, a particular gift?
I don't know whether it eventuated, but there was some discussion about a painting which the committee was going to pay for out of their funds, not out of council's funds, particularly with Indigenous art.
That's correct.
They were talking. I couldn't be sure that they actually did that, but that was talked about.
0.5. Wendy has bought.
There you go.
Good. Very good. So it hasn't happened yet, but yes, that's right. All right, thank you. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. 9.3, the minutes of the Public Transport and Traffic Advisory Committee held on the 14th of August. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Miles. Councillor Williams.
No, my motion is to receive and note, Mr.
Receive and note.
Yes.
Yeah,
Any discussion on this?
There's a whole lot of recommendations.
Yeah, I think they were meant to be, sorry if I may,
Councillor Collins?
I didn't know that they were actually recommendations to council rather than a,
They are recommendations to council,
okay.
and it should say that, not recommendations, recommendations to council.
So, sorry, just a point of clarification. You've moved to receive a note to not accept the recommendations.
No, I'm not saying, Mr Mayor, I'm not saying I'm not accepting the recommendations, but I don't think, I could be corrected by the General Manager, the advisory committees direct council and provide advice, not recommendations as such.
Yes, however, it should read recommendations to council, then council can accept those recommendations or accept that advice if it so wishes, or not. It's your choice. Or you can refer it back to the committee for more information, or you can ask for a further report from council staff.
The matters that are on this agenda, how do they get there?
Mostly by letters from the committee, local people, asking for the matter to be considered, and then we referred it to the PT&T committee for their advice. So, for example, I'll just use the first one, Margaret Street boat ramp. So, because I happen to be aware of it, the Mayor and I met with Mr Atkinson. And we suggested that he write to council, which he did. We referred it to the PT&T committee. The committee went down, they've had a look, had some representations from those who were present. There were some suggestions made as to how that might be affected, and then the committee has then made a subsequent recommendation to council that in regards to parking in Alfred Street, that enforcement by council ranges be increased, enforceable solidly out lines be implemented, committee request to report on progress with broader issues of trailer parking and the parking restrictions on trailers be explored. So the committee didn't necessarily agree with all of the suggestions made by the community, but they did make some recommendations to council. Similarly, Aspinall Place, the committee is recommending. There was a request by a resident to have the no stopping signs removed. The committee says no, they should stay. Their recommendation to council is that they should stay and review it in 6 months. And most of the recommendations are all along those lines. The one that I'd probably suggest might need a bit more information is Bateman's Road traffic control measures. Some of the things that are suggested there, we've been down this track several times, and I'm not sure we want to go back there again, but anyway, that's just my view. But most of them are not unreasonable recommendations to council. However, if the council's not confident, they could ask for more information. I've just picked on another one, line marking in Church Street. The committee supports it. It may well be the council has a different view and says, well, can we have a report back on what are the implications of extending the line marking in Church Street, for example.
Mr Mayor,
Councillor Williams.
I have difficulty with the process which this represents. Somebody writes to council with a concern, but then bypasses council, goes straight to a community-based committee that is then lobbied by individuals, which may not be a cross-section view. I just have a difficulty, as I had with the Bushland Committee, as to the process associated with this. Having community representatives on a committee subjected to representations by individuals in the community, I think is not a reasonable thing to do, considering those people on the panel, on the advisory committee, live in the area. And we're not sure whether or not the full issues were canvassed by the people that did their presentation. So I find it difficult to accept those recommendations without having the opportunity to find out what those representations were and whether there are other views that might be not being reflected here. Council's role is to take into consideration all the community's views and I don't think it's appropriate for a committee to be taking that burden on themselves, and I would prefer that matters before they go to any advisory committee are considered by councillors before they go there, on the basis that if we can make a decision ourselves without needing community or advisory committee input, then that saves the time and does buffer or protect those panel members from being subjected to representations from the community.
Councillor, so what is your suggestion here? Do you have a suggestion that you want to make?
Oh, well,
in relation to this?
receive and note the report, and secondly, to review the process which the committee,
All right.
the advisory committee operates.
Receive and note and review the process.
I'll second.
Could I suggest that should be review the process and charter?
Accept that.
I think we already have a seconder in Councillor Miles
Right, sorry.
for it originally.
We do.
Councillor Sanson,
If I
do you have a
could,
question or a query, or
Well, is it possible?
do you wish to speak for? Do you wish to speak against?
Uh,
Or do you have a query? Question would be good.
I have a question.
Thank you.
As the chair of the committee, I have some concern about some of the issues that Councillor Williams has raised. I agree. There are many times I'm very concerned about whether we, as a committee, we are seeing all of the evidence, and that's when I start to try to, pull back what we do. In terms of the issues, it was an extremely full agenda. I had no control over that. That was simply set by staff. In terms of the parking in Alfred Street, Woolwich, we had a very productive forum, and I think Councillor Collins would agree, he was there at the time. There was a lot of discussion. There was a lot of explanation on my part about what the limitations on signage and so on were, as there was from the Manager of Works and Services. In the minutes, which I amended, I went to some trouble to try to explain what those representations were. I think that was a pretty fair representation of the committee. So I think on that issue, that was a very valuable exchange. Others, I think a lot of the time the answers were pretty obvious. So I don't really think it's appropriate just to simply reject these recommendations out of hand. I guess perhaps the process needs to be that Council is provided with more information in order that there is information there on which whether recommendations can be followed or rejected, and I thought that's what the process would be. My question, I guess, is if this process isn't going to continue, how are we going to get through this volume of work? Because I think that this process has provided a significant amount of work. The issue in terms of Alfred Street, Woolwich, has existed for some time. Both Councillor Miles and I referred it to through questions without notice. We were both given the same answer on that. We haven't seen much in the way of resolution of that problem. This committee has partially looked into it. It's recognised that it hasn't had all the information. That's why at point 3, in terms of the way it's handled, the recommendation as far as parking in Alfred Street, Woolwich is concerned, it has asked for more information because it didn't believe it had all the information in front of it. But it felt that there was enough information there in order to recommend a resolution of a problem with parking in that western end of Alfred Street where driveways are being blocked. So I guess I've answered my question to some extent.
So is your question of Councillor Williams, how would we get through the work?
Exactly.
Okay. Councillor Williams, would you like to make a suggestion? Or?
Well, Mr. Mayor, quite a lot of the work is not relevant to, or not, doesn't need to go to a panel. It can be dealt with, and as I come back to the point that the committee is not experienced in dealing with community concerns. They're providing feedback as they've interpreted it. I think if there is significant community concern, that debate needs to be had here, so I can hear what that debate is and make my decision with all the information, not a second-hand report from an advisory panel, advisory committee. I respect their role in providing advice to us and looking at the issues that need advice, but I don't believe a number of these items should have been directly put to the panel, to the advisory committee. I think a couple of them should have come here first for us to consider and view all the evidence in a more complete way. I'm not confident that the panel or the advisory committee, has heard all the evidence that I would need to make a decision.
Right, thank you, Councillor Williams. So let's get back to where we were. Does anybody else like to speak? You've answered the question. Does anybody else like to speak for?
I'd like
the
to
motion?
clarify that at the time that I put my hand up, I thought Councillor Williams was moving the motion. So I would actually flag that if it was miscommunicated, that I will withdraw my second.
No, seconded by Councillor Hall.
Oh, it's second.
Yeah, I seconded it.
All right. It was Councillor
Against.
Miles, but Councillor Collins, are you happy to second that motion?
Yes, I am.
Right, thank you. Good.
If I can
Good.
perhaps speak to it. I was in that committee, and I was not expecting council to have all these recommendations. Most of these things have already been done, I understand. For instance, if you look at street parking outside 17 and 17A Ferry Street, some lines were painted there, and that was decided. I understand that's probably been done. I was not of the understanding that that all came to council. They're mostly minor matters, but I had nothing to do with what was on the agenda or how it came. So I agree that this is probably, there's not enough information for council to make a decision on all these things. So I think it should be received and note. And if anything raises any concerns, perhaps it could be brought up for debate.
Could I just go back and Councillor Williams, and just clarify what your motion is? Just to receive and note and
Council reviews the process and charter of the PT&T committee.
Correct.
Councillor Miles, are you okay with that? Councillor Collins, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right, thank you. So let's say we've had a for, we've had an against, we've had a for, have we got another against? Councillor Miles, please.
Mr. Mayor, I actually, the distinct difference between this committee and the Bushland Working Party is that there are councillors that we have selected to represent council's interest on the committee, and I don't always agree with the recommendations that are brought forward by this committee, but in situations like this, we're given the opportunity, as they are brought to us as recommendations, to either remove them as recommendations or ask the committee to reassess those recommendations. We have ultimate control over what happens within the process of this committee. So they're making recommendations to us. We can either accept or reject those recommendations. They have obviously, and I note the Margaret Street issue, there were a lot of residents there, and I assume that there was a lot of conversation and workshopping that went on in that meeting for that to come to some resolution. And I had identified the same issue as Councillor Sanderson with the problems with trailers at Margaret Street. I don't want to reject all of the recommendations that are here, but I have in the past not agreed with the recommendations that have come out of this committee, and we have, as a council, when the report has been brought forward, I have said I would like that removed, or that this needs to be looked at again, and the council has adopted that as a policy, or has adopted that position that they'll put it back to the committee, or they'll reassess it. So I think that the process isn't, you're comparing apples with oranges when you say it's like the Bushland Working Party, because we have councillors on the committee to represent our interests and to bring issues back to the council if they think that something is being recommended that didn't reflect the views in the room, or that the council may have an issue with. So I think that the system that goes into this is not a flawed one. We still have ultimate control over this.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Would anybody like to speak for the motion?
I have a question.
Question. Who's your question on?
Through you to the General Manager, if I may, Mr Mayor. With these recommendations that have been made here, Councillor Collins, for example, said, some of this stuff's already been done. Just understanding the idea of the committee, I would have thought it saves us a lot of money. There's a lot of local people with a long line of experience having served on the committee, two councillors, as you say. So when something comes before them and they consider it with the Head of Works and Services there, can't the Head of Works and Services advise, yes, that's something we can just do. That won't require a resolution of council. That's just something we can just do because it's doable within the budget or within the remit of our work. And then if it's a recommendation to council, perhaps we just ask the committee to be clearer on that, that it's a recommendation to council, and then it becomes something we do discuss in the chamber. Otherwise, I'm just curious, is that how it could work? Because I don't understand the point of having a committee if we're not going to take their advice.
This committee has been around for as long as I've been here. But it's sort of morphed a little bit. And what's happened is, for instance, I can tell you now, there are 2 items on there. The reason they're on there is because the people who made the request won't accept the decision of the staff. So straight away they go and lobby councillors, and then councillors ask a question, and then all of a sudden it's on the agenda. I won't say which ones. So it's sort of become this de facto way of getting around things. The other, which I think is exactly what they are there for, and maybe that's where the system's fallen over a little bit, and again that's because of movements in people and places. Just using the parking in Alfred Street as an example, I think that should have been a report to council, and within that report would have been the committee recommendation. The report would have had all the detail in it, and then there was a recommendation for the committee. Then the council could look at it and say, well, yeah, that's okay, but who have we consulted? How was the consultation done? Yada, 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 yada. And then say, okay, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this first, and then we'll come back to it. Right? So I think there's a bit of misplaced logic, perhaps is not the right word. That's why I think it's worth having a look at the charter. Right? Again, just to see that it's there, reinforcing both from the staff's point of view and the committee members' points of view what their actual charter is. Because Councillor Williams is quite right. They were there, they're always been there as an advisory group, and they are, and their charter says they can make recommendations to council. They can't make decisions. That's why these lists of recommendations are here. Now, technically, using the Ferry Street one as an example, the line marking should not have been done until the council adopted these minutes or adopted these recommendations.
I don't know if they have been done.
No, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
but if they have been done, they shouldn't have been done because the council hasn't adopted the recommendations of the committee yet. Then they would go and do it, right? But simply, why did it even go to the PT committee in the first place, for example, right? And I think perhaps that the staff are using it as a way of getting some authorisation or whatever to do it rather than accepting the responsibility. And I think that's a result of some staffing arrangements that were in place that have recently been changed.
Does that answer your question?
Sort of, so I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
But just on the line marking thing, I thought we had resolved as a council to do that, so that I wouldn't have thought it did need to come back to council. But so anyway, so just to clarify, if they have something that they think should come to council as a recommendation, what they as a committee perhaps need to do is say to the head of Works and Services, this item, can you please take it to council as a report for the next meeting?
Well, no, the staff member actually should make that decision, should simply say, right, now that I've got that recommendation for the committee, I need to take this to the council. And that's the bit that's missing.
Yes.
And I think that's where the charter needs just to be reviewed.
The charter
and make
does,
sure,
or the way...
No, the charter, because the charter will say exactly what should happen.
Okay.
Right? And I think the staff have anyway,
Okay, does that
I
answer
think
your
there
question?
needs to be a little bit of education of the staff that are
exactly.
now responsible for this.
Yes.
Right? I know that.
But does that require a review of the charter, or does that just require...
Yeah, I'd like to just have
education of the
a
staff
look at
and the
it.
committee?
Yeah, no,
Review it.
I think the charter ought to be reviewed anyway, because it hasn't really been changed since, I don't know when. But I think what I'm confident of is that the committee, as it stands now, is quite, I'll just get the right word here, don't want to put my foot in it, is confident in the staff that are working with the committee. I know that I've got some very positive feedback back from the committee reps. I think it's just a matter of a little bit of training and education for that staff member as to how all this should fit together.
Thank you.
And
Right, does that answer your
Yeah, it
question?
does, thank you.
Councillor Sanderson.
If I could just support the General Manager's observation about the one in Ferry Street. I mean, I was also very surprised that they even came before the Traffic Committee. I thought council had a policy on that where staff could have made that decision. So that just seemed like an odd one.
So it was
We dealt with
unnecessary.
because it was there.
All right, thank you. Could I say this committee's done some excellent work over the years, and we must remember that there's been great work done. It won't be perfect all the time. I don't expect any of the committees or working groups to be perfect all the time, and we need to be a bit tolerant if they don't quite get it right. But I think there's always good intentions in this committee, and it's done some very good things. So there's no further discussion. I'd like to put the motion, and I'll ask the General Manager to read the motion. I don't think we need to continue on, do we? Could you read them?
well, actually, I think you do, but I'll read the motion as it stands. That the report is received and noted, and the council reviews the process and charter of the PT&T committee.
Any further comments, queries? Can I put the motion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Let me check again. Those in favour of the motion moved by Councillor Williams. Those against? That's lost. All right. So are we back to the...
Could I suggest something?
you can, General Manager.
I think to assist. I think we still need the report is received and noted. 3, we still need to review the process and charter. However, I think there are some recommendations that the council can quite easily adopt without being contrary to what you're actually trying to achieve here. In number 1, Power in Harford Street, I think it's fine that the Rangers do that. And 4 is okay, but I think 2 and 3 should be combined so that a further report actually comes back to the council, not the PT&T committee. Right? The council would like to know what are the broader issues of trailer parking and parking in Alfred Street, and whether or not the solid yellow enforceable line will actually resolve the problem. So that comes back to you, you get the report, and then you make the decision. But in the meantime, we do the enforcement, and we look at what the restrictions are. Aspinall Place, I think you could just adopt that one, that's fine. 17, we can adopt that, that's pretty straightforward. Caribou, I think that could be adopted as well, I don't see a problem with that. I think the council should ask for a report on potential Bateman's Road traffic control measures before we do any of those things. There's a heap of history. In fact, I would suggest the history on Bateman's actually goes back to when Councillor Williams was on the council previously, if I'm not. So it's been around a long time before we touched that one. The bike plan, look, again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no funding, so we're going to see if we can get some funding. The Church Street one,
Could I just have a bit of clarification on that? I don't quite understand.
the Church Street one, yeah, I think, again, what concerned me about this one in particular was it actually came off the floor.
Yes.
Now, there was one of the committee members just brought it up as a matter of course. So there was no report, really, everyone agreed with what he's doing. I think that's where there's a problem.
Yes.
Councillor
I think
Williams.
that's the point Councillor Williams is making.
That is a problem because the residents are going to be impacted by extending that, don't even know about it. The signs will turn up one day. So I really think we've got to review the way the panel operates.
So I think the line marking one, I would refer that back to the staff for a report. So, and the same with Bateman's, I'd refer that to the staff for a report.
Councillor Sanderson.
On that one, as it was minute.
Which one's that, sorry?
The line marking.
It was simply minute.
Church Street, 4.1?
Yeah, that was, or,
Line marking in Church.
yeah, it was simply minuted that the committee agreed with that position. It was not that,
Supports the
there
proposal.
intended to be a recommendation.
Well, that's right. So again, there's a little bit of education there, but I think if we just refer it back to the staff for a report, then they can come back and say, well, yes, we should do it, or no, we shouldn't. So what would happen now is that 1 and 2 would be as previously. 3 would be parking in Alfred Street, which would be that council staff, the enforcement arrangements increased. 2 would be parking restriction towers be explored, and 2 and 3 would become 1, and that would be a further report to council. Aspinall Place would become number 4, and that's as printed. Ferry Street would become number 5, and that's as printed. Caribou would become number 6, and that's as printed. Bateman's would become 7, and that's referred to the staff for a report back to council. 8 would be under the bike plan, and that is as written. And 9 would be the line marking, and that would refer back to staff for a report.
I'll move that.
I'll move that, mate.
Second.
Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Miles. Now let's talk about, could we just have a list of the ones we're getting a report back on? Just to be really clear.
Yes, you are getting a report back on the parking in Alfred Street in relation to the enforceable yellow line, and broader issues of trailer parking and parking in Alfred and Margaret Streets. You're getting a report back on,
Just the numbers.
that's
3.4?
That's numbers 2 and 3 of parking in Alfred Street, which is part 3.
So 3.2, item 3.2.
No, you can't, just forget about that. Just go to the recommendations to council. Forget all that other stuff, just go to the recommendations to council. There,
Okay.
right? So parking in Alfred Street is, we're doing 1 and 4, 2 and 3, we get a further report. And then Bateman's Road, which is where Bateman's Road is, that becomes number 7, and that will be the subject, the whole of that will be a subject of a further report. And number 9, the line marking in Church Street, that will be the subject of a further report. So there are 3 matters that will come back as reports. The other recommendations will be adopted. And we will review the process and charter of the committee.
Is that clear to everybody?
Can I just make a comment though, just
Councillor.
in relation to some of these reports that are coming back to council? Some of these issues might be really relevant at the precinct meetings as well. So while I'm happy for reports to come back to council, I'm not sure if we should make any definitive decisions until we've spoken.
Well,
That adds another level of decision and
Look,
consultation.
I think this is where you really need to be very careful that you don't over-bureaucratise the council processes by saying,
Just a comment.
referring everything to precinct committees. I can assure you my research is a little bit different perhaps to some of yours in relation to how precinct committees can work. I think what we're proposing to do here, which is very informal and like a roadshow. I think it's a great idea, but other councils are abrogating their responsibility as a councillor by referring stuff to precinct committees.
I'm not referring it to precinct committees.
Let's,
I'm
know.
let's,
There's a difference between...
councillors, could we get back onto the matter?
Just be very careful.
Councillors, could we get back onto the matter at hand? Just a clarification of where we're getting reports back and which ones we're accepting tonight. I'm sorry to ask you again, General Manager, could you do it again for me?
Right. Reports back to council will be in relation to parking in Alfred Street, in relation to the use of the enforceable solid yellow line, and progress on the broader issues of trailer parking and parking in Alfred Street. You will get a report back on Bateman's Road traffic control measures on the whole of that. All of that is coming back with a report on what needs to happen in Bateman's Road, bearing in mind the resolution of the committee. And 9, line marking in Church Street, that will come back as a report as well, whether or not that's necessary. Now, the other side of that may well be consultation with the RMS, who may or may not agree that that should extend. We've had that argument with the RMS before.
All right. So, is it clear to everybody?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
We've got a seconder, a mover and a seconder. Councillor Williams, did you want to speak to this?
No, Mr Mayor, I think we can deal with it. The General Manager's given good guidance as to what's needed.
Does anybody else like to speak against this? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager, for helping. 9.4, report on councillors' briefings and workshop held 13th of August. Move Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Miles. Councillor Williams.
Again, I don't think this really indicates the depth of information we've got, but I do note that that report is now out for people to consider. But I think it's important to include here that we are holding a information evening, which council has resolved to do and has organised. I think it's on the 30th. So that the community can get direct feedback as to the information in the report. I think that needs to be noted in here, in addition to the report being announced.
Make a note on the date of the GSB meeting. Thank you. Councillor Miles, anything you'd like to say about this?
Not particularly.
Any further queries? I'll move. Seconded. Put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 10.1, Councillor Miles, Councillor Williams. Councillor Miles.
Can I just say I have done some work with Bravehearts before, and they are a fantastic organisation with a very worthwhile cause to essentially eradicate child abuse in Australia within the next 20 years. Some of the statistics that come out of Bravehearts are quite eye-opening.
Horrendous.
Horrendous. And some of the stuff that came out of the Royal Commission that I know Hetty Johnson and Bravehearts generally have been pushing for a very long time, really brought to light the importance of organisations like this. So I just wonder whether Council may take up in the letter sent by Hetty Johnson about White Balloon Day, take up some of those initiatives. It's something, obviously, having worked with the organisation that I'm quite passionate about, and they are a very good organisation, do a lot of good in the community.
Is that something you'd like to see as workshop, Councillor?
Yes.
Only when is it? 2nd to the 8th of September, so White Balloon Day is the 7th of September. Don't think you'll have a time for a workshop. I would think that if Council was of a mind, we could easily register for White Balloon Day and look at how we may be able to, for example, promote White Balloon Day in the Mayor's column. We can put some posters up around the place.
If we could.
And that's probably about, and we can put some promote safe child messages on our website. That's probably about as far as we can do that. So Council could register for White Balloon Day and consider options for participation.
I think we could still workshop it at some time in the future. This
In
is
the
this is
future,
an
I would-
ongoing
I
issue.
would
Oh, it's not going to
appreciate
be,
if we
it's not
could
going to
do
go
that.
away.
No, I think we can, let's do that. There's a couple of other issues we probably need to put our minds to when we've got a bit of time as well. Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I support it wholeheartedly. The only thing that I would bring to council's attention, and I think we can probably waiver it in this case, that we are talking about White Balloon Day.
Yes, I realise.
And so I'm not a fan of banning balloons. I think balloons play an important role in children's imagination, but I think it's important that we support this day and just leave the balloon ban aside for this event.
Thanks, Councillor.
So part 2 would be council considers this matter further at a future workshop.
Yes.
So I need a move in a
Is
second.
that okay with you? Councillor Miles and seconded Councillor Williams. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, against, that's carried. Thank you. 12.1, Councillor Crasso, very quick. Thank you, Councillor Crasso. I could even see that when I was looking down.
I have been following this conference for some months as their program has been evolving. I think it's a really exciting international conference. It's bringing together speakers from all over the world on the topic of, well, various things, in particular placemaking, which is something I'm personally quite passionate about. I think with the Gladesville planning that Council's talking of and the property committee that we've recently formed, I think it's really important that we have representatives from our council at this conference hearing what's happening all over the world, particularly in Fremantle. I know there'll be some workshops on nighttime economies and also the adaptive reuse of heritage buildings in Fremantle. In the report it says here, and this is from the conference's homepage, that we need to deliver places designed for people to live, work, play, visit and study. There's also a theme of inclusion, which I know that we as a council are feeling quite strongly about. We've talked in the past about the changing face of the way people live in our suburb and about our heritage concerns, and I just think it would be really valuable with those committees and with those strategic plans that we're working towards, that we seek this international forum to gather information. I spoke to it. Sorry.
Seconded Councillor.
What was the
Look,
motion?
Seconded Councillor
oh, you want a
Miles. Is
motion?
that right?
Look, I was so excited. I just.
So you're moving the recommendation?
I'm moving the recommendation.
And just one moment, have we got a seconder? Councillor Miles.
second the motion.
Councillor Crasso, would you like to speak to this motion?
I can't remember what I said, but I'd say it all
You actually
again.
did say you'd like to go.
I'd also recommend that a member from Development and Regulatory Control attend this conference. And if, as mentioned over here in the report but not in the recommendation, if there were an opportunity for a councillor to be sent, I would love to be considered to go along.
Thank you, Councillor Crasso.
Move that as an amendment.
Moved as an amendment.
I don't think we would need to be moving.
So Councillor Crasso, we'd add that.
Number
A
3
member
will
of the
be,
Development and Regulatory Control attend the
Number 3.
conference and
number 3 will be councillor Crasso, will be council's
Nominated.
delegate.
Yep.
So you get a right to report.
Councillor Miles.
And we get a report back.
Mr Mayor, if it would be of any use, that is something that would be of interest to me as well, and I would also be able to waive any hotel fees because I could stay with family over there.
Okay. So
If you could consider that from the council.
Can I?
Councillor Crasso.
I actually have a family over there that I could stay with, so there wouldn't be hotel fees for me. And if Councillor Miles were to waive his as well, that would be very close to add up to being able to send another councillor along, if that were the case. But
I will check my dates.
Yeah.
But we'll No.
I think the costs are in the airfares largely, Councillor Crassoy. I think that's where the money is. So are we suggesting, can I check, are we suggesting the recommendation, Councillor Crassoy, is we send 2 people to the
I'm
conference?
happy for Councillor Crassoy to go. If there is an opportunity for another councillor to go, I would be interested, but it's not absolutely essential.
Can I refer it back to the General Manager on budgetary reasons? I don't think this is something we'd planned to attend. I don't think we've got a budget for it. So, General Manager, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think if the 2 councillors are prepared to meet their own accommodation costs, we could probably do it.
Okay, so your motion says to...
So it would be Councillor Crassoy and Miles be councillors delegates to the conference with accommodation costs being met by the councillors.
All right. So are there any... moved Crassoy and Miles. Are there any further comments?
I can say. I should make some comments.
General Manager.
Right. We have attended this conference in the past. We haven't had councillors attend for some time. Councillor Astridge was the last person to attend, so that'll give you an idea how long ago it was. I think it was last year's conference, in fact, that Steve Kirpis and Philippa Hayes both attended, and Philippa actually did a presentation to the conference on the Gladesville work that we did with Place Partners. It was a joint presentation with Place Partners. It's very well received, so it is quite a good conference. And one of those 2 staff members will go. I don't know which one yet. Work it out between them.
All right. So can I put the motion? Those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. So we've got our meetings, I think, is the next thing on 12.2 meetings. Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Sanderson. Any further discussion on this? Councillor Crassoy.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask that notice of meetings be a little earlier for the members, for the committee members and the participants in the meetings? I do often get comments, particularly on the Main Street meetings, but something that came up recently that someone had to decline to attend because they just didn't feel they'd been given enough notice. Perhaps as a question to the GM, is there a time that we are supposed to give notice? And I would have thought 3 or 4 weeks.
Well, what should happen is that one of the items on the committee's agenda should be the next meeting date.
Should be the last item on every meeting.
Should be the last item on every meeting. What's the next meeting date?
Confirmation of the date. Just
so they just need to agree if they want to change it, that's fine. Yeah. It appears on this document, which is publicly available. So is what's on, so they're published in the council's business paper. Gladesville and Huddersfield Main Streets have probably been a bit of a problem because not often we've had to move their dates.
Dates have changed.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas we should say they meet, I don't make it every 3 months on this date, right? And then don't move it. If they can't move it, they can't make it, they can't make it. So
I think the dates were changed by council, not by the committees.
Yes, they have. Yes, they are. Yeah. Or they're done because the person organising the committee has had a number of requests from committee members that we can't make it. He knows he's not going to get a quorum, so he'll move it. So I think that's just got to set the date and stick with it.
Any further discussion?
I can I just raise one issue just in relation to the what's on. Is there any reason why we can't put the DCU dates into? Was that once a week?
No, it's not. But we could.
I think it's important.
We put the LPPs in, so we can put
right.
the DCUs in.
We put the LPPs in.
Yep.
So if we could get the DCUs, and then we can make a decision as councillors whether we want to attend and oversee what's happening at those.
Yep, we can do that.
Thank you.
They usually, that's. Yeah.
So councillors are able to
Yep, of course you can.
Observe those meetings.
Yep, my word.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Is there any further business we need to do with? Councillor Crassoy.
I'll ask a question before I raise it because I'm still not quite sure on
meeting
procedures. There were a couple of items that were raised in the Bushland Committee's report that I wanted to ask about, and it didn't fit in with the motion that was made at the time. And So I'm just curious how I now have those items spoken to or addressed or answered. And I can tell you what they are, and you might be able to help me, General Manager.
You could take them up via email with the General Manager tomorrow morning if you wish. Or if you particularly need an answer now, you can do it now.
Comment.
Or put a question.
Question without notice.
A question without notice?
That's one way to do it, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that then, rather than waste.
I mean, you can
your
ask me
time.
now. If I can answer it, I will.
Sure.
How many questions do you have?
Well, it's two, but in relation to one beast, the bee. So on page 66, which I can't seem to locate for some reason, on page 66 of the paper, there's item 3 in the Bushland Committee's.
There isn't.
No, it's not.
It's not page 66. yeah.
Oh, it's
69.
69. Okay.
No.
Let's go with 72, because it might have been 76 then. Page 72, item 13 on native bees. At the start of the year, I had asked Council about the possibility of pursuing education around native bees in the community in spring, which it now is. And the reason is because native bees are an opportunity to pollinate as well, and they don't require as much work and they're stingless. I would really like to see that not just kind of appear on each report that Councillor Crasola would like Council to promote stingless bees. I'm wondering how there's a way to bring that forward. And then also on
We're doing
page
it.
76 is about bees.
We are doing it.
Pardon?
It's a big article in the next newsletter.
Oh, good. Thank you. Great. And then there's an item on page 76, my apologies, 3, beehives in various reserves. And it says Gavin Smith, experienced beekeeper, may be installing
That's it.
bee swarm traps.
Yep, he's doing it.
So I'm curious as a councillor how I find out more about this, because trapping naturally occurring swarms, if you read articles from around the world, unless there's new research, it is a way of monitoring varroa mite, which isn't even in Australia yet. Well, not down here anyway. But it's also a way of ensuring that the naturally occurring swarms will be potentially wiped out, because if varroa does get there, it gets there in closed hives and with bee management procedures and contamination with beekeeping equipment. And it's our naturally occurring hives or swarms that I would have thought need to be not trapped too much. So I'm just curious how many he's planning to trap, what his reason is for wanting to trap them.
So your question would be, are we implementing it and how are we doing it?
Can
Just
we
ask
have-
for a report.
Is that, yeah?
Yep.
Thank you. I just think,
Yeah,
I
that's
would
fine.
hate to just say, yay.
That's fine. Mind you, I suspect you're probably only one of about 500 councillors who know anything about natural bees, but I know,
Stingless bees.
you know,
I've been stung by a few in my time.
well, I'm allergic to bee stings, so look out.
I've got a stingless beehive in my yard.
We do too.
Councillor Miles.
I'm sorry to raise this so late in the piece. I'd like to raise a couple of motions without notice if possible. Barring I was a little bit glued to the television last week and a little bit busy for various reasons, chaos in federal parliament mainly, I didn't get motions in on time, and I thought that given these are time sensitive, potentially I might raise them here. I don't think the councillors will have any issue with them. One is to raise a condolence motion for Bob Love.
There'll be a mirror minute at the next meeting.
Merrill
Yeah,
next
yes,
meeting,
coming
that's
next
fine.
meeting.
And the other was Paul Manton.
Same thing.
Same thing.
He's
Maybe.
still alive, isn't he?
He is. I just thought that his service to the community through the soccer
Yeah,
club
we are working on
should be
something for Paul, yeah.
recognised in a formal way. I know the club is working towards something
They
being
are.
done for him.
They are.
They are.
But I think the council should reach out to him.
They will
and
come to
recognise
council.
that.
They will come to council too.
Thank you. I represent the council.
Okay, so questions without notice, please. Any further business? I'll close the meeting, close 10:20. Thank you, councillors.